Okay, so a quick intro. I'm going to do a quick overview here. I'm going to talk about FFA, BEAD, and AI. So as Shelby said, I'm going to talk about grant writing and preparation, which is kind of where some of that AI comes in. And then within the BEAD is where I'm going to talk about some of the digital equity components, but also considerations for BEAD that aren't as spoken about as much. And I'll try to skim over some of the parts so we're not repeated with the agenda later on. My two disclaimers are that I am not a lawyer, so any advice and information here should not be taken as legal advice. And also that I am not psychic. So I talk about some timelines, I talk about some guidelines. Those are always subject to change and update. So what is in this presentation is to the best of our knowledge at our organization. Our organization, so we are a grant consulting and management company. We focus in a lot of different areas from healthcare to school safety and then obviously broadband. We have a team of 7 broadband grant consultants that do writing for broadband grant writing and then also consulting and strategy. We, in the past 3 years, have helped our clients win over $300 million in broadband funding. And have really honed what we do down to a practice. Right now, we are focusing on a few different states, one of which is California, and also helping our clients prepare for BEAD. So those are going to be my 2 areas of discussion here. So starting with the one that makes me happy, last mile federal funding account. So the quick overview that this is a $2 billion grant program for last mile broadband infrastructure. So all projects need to have a last mile component to them. It was established in accordance with the 2021 Senate Bill 156. So the due date for this is September 29th at 4 p.m. Pacific. That's something to keep in mind. Oftentimes we see 11:59 p.m. for grant programs. Not this one. We are at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Projects must offer wireline service at 100 megabits symmetrical or above, again, looking at that last mile component. And then there's a 24-month implementation period for these projects, which can be caveated with some CEQA stuff that I'll discuss later on, but for the most part, we're looking at 24-month implementation periods. So this $2 billion was split up between 2 buckets of money. So rural counties and urban counties. They had a formula that they used to decide how much money each county was getting. So these are just the urban ones. I felt that this was covering a lot of the regions that might be on the call. I don't have the rural, but I'm happy to send the rural allocations to any rural county representatives here after the call. But an important thing to keep in mind with this is that when you're submitting an application, if you are, or if you're thinking about it, you won't be competing against the entire state. You will only be competing against other folks and other applicants in your county. So that can drastically reduce the, I think we have someone who can go on mute. I'm hearing an echo for mine. Anyway, it reduces the amount of competition for applications, but it also reduces the amount of available funds. So it's important to see your county here and how much has been allocated to get a sense of how much you'll be competing for and who else might be looking at those funds as well. For this, there is no first come, first serve. So for those of you who did a LATA application, we know that those were, the sooner you got them in, the better. This, it's as long as you get it in by that deadline, you're in the same batch. So they're not going to be reviewing them, as they come in. It's just compiled there at the deadline. They have said there will be another round should all the funds not be used in this round. I highly doubt that. I think, as we know, there's a lot of interest. There's going to be a lot of competition. I don't know that many of the counties will go into a second round, but regardless, to be safe, you want to make sure that you're getting in by that September 29th deadline. Some important scoring factors. So this is out of 130 points. You do not need a match, but you do get points if you do a match. So you get 1 point for every 10% rounded of matching funds. So if you have a match of 50% of your total budget, you get 5 points. But again, this is something that is not required in your application. Level of need. So you have 50% or more of your project area needs to be in a disadvantaged community or is at or below 80% of either the state median or median income or county median income, whichever is higher. And so this is determined on an applicant tool, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So it's all laid out in a map. You can easily determine if you are 50% or more in this area. You get 20 points if you get into this category, and it's an all or nothing. So there's no levels to it. It's if you are 50% or more, you get those 20 points. And an important one, I think, for this group to think about is partnerships. So when they talk about partnerships, you can certainly have, a public-private partnership, a variety of different things. But what you're ended up scored on is the ownership of the infrastructure. So if you do not have a partnership and you are a municipality, you plan on providing the service through your own utility, you can still get points in this for partnership because they're looking at, again, who owns the infrastructure. You get 1 point for every 5% that is owned by local government, nonprofit, or tribal entity. And you can get up to 20 points in this category. So these are some of the, a little more unusual, I would say, scoring criteria that you might not see in every grant you've done before that I wanted to call out here. Moving on to important things to know. So these are tips that we have learned. They are not in any guidance or FAQ. They have come from our communication with CPUC. So again, our team, we've got a bunch of applicants and trying to get as much clarity as we can. So I'm going to share some of that here that will hopefully be helpful. COGS and CAGs need a letter of credit or a request exemption from the letter of credit. So in the rules, it states that if you don't have a CPCN number or if you aren't a local government, you need a letter of credit for the full amount of your project. So COGS and CAGs don't necessarily go into either of those categories. So CPUC talked to their legal team. They confirmed that COGS and CAGs are eligible applicants, but you are more of a de facto government entity, and in that case, you need to request an exemption. So that's an important thing to consider, that you are not a government entity, you're de facto, and you'll have to either get the letter of credit or an exemption, which is what we would suggest you go for. Oops. You can include unincorporated areas in your application. So we have a lot of cities and counties that we're working with, and if your project is just in your city, but there's some areas outside, you can incorporate those into your project. You do not need to stay just within your city boundaries. So this one, requiring a pricing commitment on an RFQ or RFI will meet the criteria for the pricing category. So there are up to 40 points that relate to pricing, to the different kind of commitments that you'll do in terms of how much you're charging and how long you're charging and what kind of affordability you're doing. But we have a lot of clients who won't be providing service. So how do they get these pricing categories if they're not actually going to be providing the service? Solution here is looking for an ISP partner. You don't need to have anything signed. What you want to have is an RFQ or an RFI, and within that, list the requirements of this pricing category, and you will then get the points up to those 40 points on the application. So that is sufficient for CPUC to give you points in that category if you're a municipality and you're not looking to provide service. The last one here, you must use the applicant tool and the grant portal. So the applicant tool is a separate website and it ties into the grant portal. So when I was talking about that 50% community, that's all on the applicant tool. in the applicant tool, it's going to pull information, it's going to pull maps, it's going to pull census data, census blocks. So it's really important. You can't submit an application if you're not using the applicant tool. Something to consider if you haven't started and you're only thinking about going after this is that you do have a long document that you have to sign for CostQuest in vitro. So we know that some of our clients have had to have their legal counsel involved to make sure they have approval to sign that. So just something to consider when you're signing up for that applicant tool. And again, you need a separate account. It's a separate website for the grant portal. So right here is just a quick look at what the applicant tool looks like. So you'll see you select your different census blocks and it pulls census information. It gives you a lot of stuff, and then all of this is going to tie right back into that portal. What I come to next is to be prepared for CEQA. So these are going to be your environmental assessments, and they are going to request a lot of things for this. They want to see key photos or photos of key observation points. They want to know construction details about pole loading requirements. Are you going to be breaking new ground? Have you done an environmental study? Whether you're going to do a preliminary endangerment assessment. There's a lot of environmental questions to a degree that sometimes we haven't seen before. So this is just something to be prepared for, be having the conversations with your appropriate partners with, internal, external, to know what kind of environmental impact your project will have. So I'm going to take a moment to pause if anyone has a quick FFA question before I move on. If not, you can think about it, maybe have one at the end, but a moment or two if you do have something that springs to mind about the FFA program. Jump right into BEAD. So a quick BEAD recap. This is my emoji for BEAD. It can be sometimes confusing. So where are we in this BEAD process? So right now we are in that little number 4 there on this map, BEAD initial proposal. So the allocations have been made for all of the states, and now the states are putting together these initial proposals. There is 180 days for them to do this. NTIA will then review it, say, yes, this looks good. It's then open for a challenge process. This challenge process is about their determinations of unserved and underserved locations. The only people who can reply to this challenge process are ISPs, tribal entities, municipalities, counties, governments. So it cannot be your next door neighbor, it can't be your grandma, has to be someone kind of involved in the broadband space. And then during this challenge process, you'll see 360 days. So the way we have timed this out, it's probably going to be around December, January, going into opening the programs in the spring. That's going to be at the same time, and I grabbed the wrong map, the wrong timeline here, but right below this is when digital equity programs will open up. So states will get their funding of digital equity money, and they will open their own digital equity grant program. At the same time as that is happening, there will be a national digital equity program. So this is going to be through NTIA. If you participated in the Connecting Minority Communities program 2 years ago now from NTIA, we've heard there's going to be many similarities to that in terms of what are eligible projects, what are eligible uses. And so they are going to be forthcoming hopefully soon with some information on that national competitive digital equity project. But there is a lot of money there, and so certainly an opportunity to look at. We believe the states, depending upon the state, might be a little bit slower in opening their DE programs, but no reason to not look at both of those and apply to both. So for California, we have 1,864,136,508. I said that wrong. It's $1.8 billion, which is a lot of money. Is it enough to get all our unserved and underserved? Perhaps, perhaps not. There's mixed feelings on that, but it will be still a big amount. With this funds, you must serve all unserved locations first. So what we're seeing with a lot of programs right now, including the FFA, is them trying to target a lot of these unserved locations now. So when the BEAD money comes, they can get more underserved locations. So they're trying to hit as many unserved as they can. So these BEAD funds can be used for underserved as well. So we'll see how that pans out if they're successful in that. But with the BEAD money, until they hit every single unserved location, they cannot move on to the underserved. So definitely something that when states are putting together their programs, they're thinking about. For these, there's a 4-year implementation period. So just another thing to keep in mind on a timeline of when you're thinking about your projects, if you're thinking of tying in an FFA program into a BEAD program, just considering these build timelines that you're going to have to stick to. Considerations, another emoji, not quite the smile one for FFA. But what I'm going to talk about for these is some of the lesser talked about points. So here we have prioritization. So this is lined out in the NOFO, and this is for a situation if there are conflicting applications or competing applications in the same area, which, you know, given what we've seen in program history, is a very real possibility. So when this happens, states have to look at these primary criteria, secondary criteria, and then additional factors. And based on these, decide who will win amongst those competing applications. There's obviously a lot here. I don't have time to go to it all, so I'm just going to choose one of the primary criteria to talk about, which is fair labor practice, because I think this is something that can be a little nebulous and should also be something to consider right now, because it may be something to put together or think about. So the prioritization, fair labor. First question here, what is Davis-Bacon and do I have to follow it? So the Davis-Bacon Act says that prevailing wage is required on federally funded assisted construction projects in excess of $2,000, which is any construction project for broadband. And they have outlined in the Davis-Bacon Act what the wage should be for each category of construction worker. So there are some programs, and this will come down to the states, so it may vary state by state of whether they require you to follow Davis-Bacon, or if they say you have to do something like Davis-Bacon. This is important to think about because there are some contracting companies, some construction companies that do not like Davis-Bacon and do not want to follow Davis-Bacon. And so if you're putting out an RFP for construction and that's a requirement, you might, have a difficult time or not have as many responses, to your RFP for a construction crew. So what you can do instead, what are your options if you are not necessarily looking at Davis-Bacon? Again, this will come, down to some state-by-state decisions, but in the case that you do not have to follow it, you can put together a workforce plan to ensure fair labor. So these include things such as local hire provisions, labor agreements, what kinds of prevailing wages you're using. If it's a state prevailing wage, and you're not using Davis-Bacon, are you going to be union neutral? How are you going to have your skilled workforce? A lot of different criteria to make sure you're still getting fair labor into your project. And you then are going to have to report on all of this. So that's another consideration of when you're following Davis-Bacon, it makes it a lot easier to report on. If you're not following Davis-Bacon, there's going to be a bit more legwork in your reporting that you'll have to do once construction begins. So this is something that I think, you'll want to think about and make sure is very robust, because it will be that primary criteria that they're going to look at when they're assessing competing applications. So outside of applications-ish, there's a requirement on cybersecurity. You must have a cybersecurity plan in place that follows the NIST framework. So that's the framework for improving critical infrastructure cybersecurity version 1.1. They have said that this summer, probably late this summer, they're going to do a request for comment on version 1.2. The BNOFO says to follow whichever one is the most recent. At this point, we're still at 1.1. What is the framework? I won't read all this out, but basically it is a document that gives best practices for a cybersecurity plan for infrastructure. So looking at ways to address it, how to protect yourself, all sorts of things. It is a document that was compiled by NIST, the National Institute of Standards Technology, and is used around the world. I mean, it is not just a US thing. So many cities, many counties may already have this. We have seen, though, it being an issue for tribes, for small providers, that they may have something, but it might not meet NIST standards, or it might be very outdated. Updating these or creating a new one from scratch can take a while. So this is something that hasn't been as talked about as much, and we want to make sure that people are aware that you have to have this. You cannot get BEAD funds if you don't have a cybersecurity plan based on NIST. So NIST is made up of 5 key frameworks: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. It's then broken up into 23 sections, and then there's 108 subcategories. So your cybersecurity plan probably wouldn't cover all 108 subcategories. Maybe it does, but they might not be relevant to your organization, to your city. But you do see it kind of broken down into those categories and subcategories. It's pretty straightforward of what these 5 different ones are. Identify, what are your current assets? What are your current employee practices? Protect, how are you protecting your infrastructure? How are you protecting your network? Detect, how do you detect when you have a cyber incident? What are your policies in place for that? What are your methods of detection? How often are they updated? Respond, in the event something happens, which given the way cyber is right now, it is very likely that something will happen. We had a client in Washington that had to drop out of our broadband grant program because they had a breach. So it's not so much of a if, it's now a when. How are you going to respond? And then how are you going to recover? So these are the key components that your cybersecurity plan should have. And I would encourage everyone to check with your IT department, check with whoever it might be that would house this, to make sure you're ready to click yes that we have this, and then you have to provide it, right? So the degree to which a state will review these is unknown, but in the chance that they're pretty, scrutinizing it closely, you want to make sure you meet that. So that cybersecurity plan is something to be aware of. On top of that is a CSCRM, which is the Cyber Supply Chain Risk Management Plan. So what we have found is even with many of our utility district clients and our city clients, this might not be something that is readily available. For some, it's within the cybersecurity plan. BEAD says it must be a separate document. So you may need to get your IT department to take out whatever they say about their cyber supply chain risk management plan and put it into a separate document. Again, this is something that you're going to have to provide to the state to get BEAD funds. So what is this? It has to do with the supply chain, obviously, and where you are in it. So think about your email network, right? If you're using Microsoft, you're connected to Microsoft. If Microsoft has a big hack, that could affect you. That's supply chain. So we're not talking about, there's a back order on parts or fiber. We're talking about cyber supply chain. So there's a little diagram here about, your organization, technology supplier, buyers, vendors. So these plans can look at what cyber requirements you have that you demand of your vendors, how you verify that, how you follow those, how you communicate with your vendors and suppliers, and how you protect yourself and how that then protects them. So it is not as much to do with, an actual cyber incident on your network, more so in this kind of supply chain ecosystem. So again, this has to be a separate document. What I will bring in is that BEAD funds and digital equity funds can be used to address these things. So access to cybersecurity software to cybersecurity training that is part of digital equity. So if you're looking at going after and you have a robust plan for your digital equity, consider whether you can include cybersecurity training in that. Again, given the environment we're in, this is more and more important to think about. So as well as it can be included in a BEAD application. So if you say, we want to make sure we give these 5 employees cyber training, you can put that in your budget. So addressing this is a great opportunity in both BEAD and digital equity. So I would encourage you to think about that and how and if it can be incorporated. So a lot of different grants, a lot of things going on between infrastructure and digital equity, and how do you tie all these things together? It can be confusing. You can be very tempted by AI. So when we're talking AI, what are we talking? Mainly ChatGPT. So for those of you who have not been following AI in the news, or you're not watching the news at all, what is ChatGPT? I asked it itself, and it says it is an AI-powered conversational agent or chatbot that uses natural language processing to generate human-like responses. So think about it this way. You have to write about the needs of your community. You can say, tell me about the needs of Santa Barbara County, and it can list out all sorts of things. You can say, tell me about the infrastructure along the 101 in XYZ area, and it can tell you about that. It pulls data from everywhere. So ChatGPT, can be very useful for grants, but there's also dangers to it that you want to consider. So first being, ChatGPT may produce inaccurate information about people, places, or facts. So if you are using this, always, always, always fact checked, particularly because as of now, it's still using old census data. So if you're writing a digital equity grant and they want to know about the poverty in the area and you're using ChatGPT, you cannot count on that census data because it is old and outdated. So you always want to make sure that you are checking the data, checking the facts that this gives you, because there is a chance it's inaccurate. And then bouncing back to what I was talking about for a bit, cybersecurity. So what are the cyber risks of ChatGPT? There are many. Anything you put into it is out there for people to see, out there for you to use. There's a security risk. We even have clients that their internal policies say they cannot use ChatGPT. So make sure that you check with folks of, hey, am I allowed to use this to help write my grant? Because it could be that such technology platforms are banned and you're not allowed to use it. So definitely keep in mind the security risk, the policies, all of that. So dangers, some cons, some pros. Should you use it? My personal opinion is that it can be helpful if you have writer's block or if you have trouble getting started, if you don't know how to address a question, right? If there's a prompt in the grant, you can put that prompt in, put your city name in, and it can help you get started. But you should not have blind trust in the facts and data given. And a big piece is that it can't replace community engagement. So especially for digital equity, you need to show what is happening in your community. You need to display the needs. You need support, you need letters, you need surveys. ChatGPT can't do that. So, you don't want to wait until a month before and say, oh, well, I'll just use ChatGPT to write this grant, because especially with a digital equity grant, it can't do it for you. It's not going to provide the information you need to be competitive. As well as that, there's some aspects of broadband that it can't speak to. So it is not a broadband engineer. It doesn't understand all of the things in your KMZ map. So it can't answer some of your questions, right? Going back to CEQA, it can't give you your CEQA answers. So there's a place for ChatGPT in a grant if you're looking to use that, if you're stuck. But just be careful and know what it can and can't do, and then know your security risks and policies as well. So at the very end, I know I kind of rushed through. I hope it didn't take up too much of my time, but I'm happy to take any questions on really anything: broadband, FFA, BEAD, digital equity, grants in general, AI to the extent that I can.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you so much. Let's open it up. If you have a question, you can pop it in the chat or raise your hand. You're welcome to unmute. This was a lot of information.
I jammed a lot. I cut about 20 slides that I started with, but you can always reach out as well. My email is there. Oh, I think we have a question.
Yes, we have a question from Brian. Curious to know if anyone is for sure applying for FFA or BEAD funds. Does anyone want to share an update about their plans? You can open that up. Josh, are you raising your hand to share an update?
I was raising my hand to ask a question, but I can also share an update. If
okay, all right.
We did recently get our broadband plan approved by our council. That was last month. And so we are in the process. We just closed an RFP for a private partner. So we're working on that selection process now. And we are planning to apply for FFA funds by September 29th. So we're re-looking at our project. Some of the requirements seem to change between when we initially looked at FFA and what they're saying now. So we're kind of re-looking at our project to try to figure out how to make sure it works with that. And then we'll be working with whoever our preferred partner is. We hope to select them by the end of next week to kind of make sure that project lines up with what they're willing to work on with us as well. So.
Great. Thank you. Chris, did you want to give an update?
Sure, yes, this is Chris with the County of Santa Barbara. We are working with RCRC to have them write an FFA grant for our county. So we're focusing on 4 priority areas in the County of Santa Barbara, all 4 more in the northern part of the county that are currently underserved or unserved. So yeah, that's what we're planning to do.
Great, thank you. And anyone from Ventura want to weigh in? Brian, are you going to? Are you planning to apply?
Moore Park is not.
Okay. Well, we can loop back around to that.
Shelby, I can.
Oh, Jory, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to sign off in just a moment, but before I do, good morning, everyone. Jory Wolf with Magellan, and I just want to give everyone a quick update on the Ventura County. They are applying for FFA last mile at the moment. They did receive a lot of funding and of course hope to receive FFA last mile. They have proposals that they'll be working on for Highway 126 and the 118 to provide services to El Rio, Satacoy, Nyland Acres, Somas, along those unserved households that are meeting the state's eligibility criteria. They did issue an RFP. The RFP results are back. We're not in a position to announce who that is yet. I'll leave that up to Terry, the CIO for the county. But we have selected an ISP partner, and we are now working on that draft agreement. We are also working and completing the draft agreement for the BCPC, Ventura County Transit Corporation, to be able to build a very cost-effective manner by plowing on the North Santa Paula rail line.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. And I just wanted to highlight that Laura Fiedler had a question about if FFA or BEAD funding allows for staffing and admin costs at local agencies. Megan responded, yes, for BEAD. FFA is more restrictive. Did you have any expansion on that, Megan, or is it just pretty much cut and dry in that sense?
Pretty much cut and dry. Again, always go back for FFA to the guidance. You know, they're pretty detailed in some part, vague in others. CPUC has been pretty quick in responding to questions. So if you don't see your answer within there of whether your specific situation would be covered, definitely reach out to them and they would let you know. For BEAD, yes, you can include those. The degree to which, again, is going to be a state-by-state decision, since all the states are going to be making their own programs. So it can vary, from how much or to what kind. It'll be, some say up to 2% of your total, some say only 50,000. So it really varies, but definitely, it's an allowable thing within the overall BEAD guidelines. I will say for Vicky's question, I am still waiting on an answer from NTIA as to whether subcontractors and subcontractors are also required to have those cyber plans. I've asked a few different folks and gotten silence from some and unsure answers from others. So I do hope to know soon. I'll say that LinkedIn LDA is very active on it, and we post a lot of updates. I post a lot of updates on these things. If you're interested right now, you can give feedback on some of NTIA's things that they're trying to do in relation to BEAD. So it's open for comment until August 2nd. So definitely a place that you can have some input on how the program is run. But still trying to find the answer on that, because it does make a very big difference. If your contractor is required to have a cybersecurity plan as well, that's a pretty big hurdle, especially for some folks. So still trying to see. Certainly a co-applicant would have to, but you and any co-applicant would have to have that.
Right.
Josh?
Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that as well. Have we heard anything? Do we know if the state's going to be providing any sort of assistance in developing those plans? I work with a lot of municipalities as part of our professional organization, MISAC, and I know that I know we all know that we need those things, but that is going to be a huge hurdle for a lot of smaller cities and smaller agencies in trying to get those developed. And especially if they're tied to a specific guideline, because we also end up with conflicting guidelines from, like those of us that have police departments get requirements from CGIS that sometimes conflict with the NIST requirements. And so we have a lot of juggling we try to do to make sure we're meeting requirements and all of these things. And I'm just curious if the state has said, yeah, we'll give more guidance or we'll provide support in, how to develop some of these plans.
So the state has received funds from a different funding source for cybersecurity. I think it's coming from FEMA, but 80% of that funds does have to go to municipalities. And so this came to them last year, and they should be putting together a plan for it, of how they want to use that funds. It could be, you submit a project to them and they say, yes, here's your money. So certainly developing those kinds of opportunities is something to look at. I'm not sure the status of where California is on that, but they do have a fair amount of money to use for helping folks with their cybersecurity. Again, I would say to look at the digital equity work, because that can be a part of digital equity as well. It has to do with, if you're thinking of it in a holistic way of can you interact with the internet? Do you have the skills to do it safely, right? So, I would say there's some other grant opportunities if the funding isn't there, both federally and at the state level. So I know that, from the states that I've talked to, many of them are aware of this. I think this and the workforce are the two pieces that they're recognizing they're really going to have to provide some support to people on, because it's going to be areas that aren't as robust as they need to meet these requirements. So I would be hopeful that they would address it hopefully soon, again, because those things can take time. But yeah.
Well, thank you, Megan, for joining us. You're welcome to stay on. I've had a couple requests for the slides, so I'll follow up with you to see if it's possible to get a PDF of those out. And just as a point of information, we'll send out a copy of this recording and the slides in a follow-up email tomorrow, probably Monday at the latest, if we don't get all the pieces together tomorrow. And with that, I am going to invite Eric Hunsinger to step into the mic here. He is the VP of Infrastructure for Golden State Net and is joining us to provide an update on the middle mile statewide middle mile build.
Thanks. I've got a few things that I'll put up on the screen, but first I want to say that I think you mentioned it before, Shelby, that the Middle Mile Advisory Committee is happening tomorrow. Let me share that link quickly. And you can see that if you take your favorite search engine and you just put in MMAC CA, you can find this website. The meeting invite is here. You just need to register. They want to know who's joining. But it's open to anyone and everyone. And there are some important updates that are happening tomorrow. However, I can't cover all of those. I got to leave some of the song and dance to CDT to cover. So please, if you have time to join. But I will tell you, even if you're not able to join, they do put in the previous meetings. So there's a whole historical piece that's here in the website. So you can see the meeting after, you can see the notes. You can get all kinds of information from this website. Then you click on resources or meetings maybe. Yeah. So it has all the past meetings, but it has integral things that are important to communities here that you can find. I think there's going to be some important updates. We're on literally the precipice of initiating construction and corporate relationships. I'm going to share a little bit of that, but let's start with what the state is building. This is the map from that same website. It's the state map. This is the current plan. And the total mileage for the middle mile, and I want to emphasize, this is a middle mile. It's very different. It functions very differently than the last mile. The middle mile reaches every corner of the state, and the goal is to interconnect all the disparate far reaches of the state into telecom centers so that communities can avail themselves of technological infrastructure of their choice. So California is graced with important technological centers in the Silicon Valley area, as well as in Los Angeles, but there's other important nodes in Sacramento where tier 1 carrier class networks have developed infrastructure. And so the goal is to interconnect that carrier class commercial infrastructure to all the communities within California. You'll see big areas here where there isn't infrastructure. That's because that's Forest Service land and it's federally owned, so we don't have a lot of connectivity there. The design process, let me see if I can jump to this slide. The design process was really built around three things. First of all, leveraging the Caltrans right-of-way, which is pretty extensive around the state. Caltrans has responsibility for real estate, probably more than any other entity within the state. They manage more real estate and property than any other state entity. And so it's their right-of-way that we're leveraging. And there's some reasons for that. One is it's easier to do construction on that right-of-way. The other is that they are a very adept project management organization. So we're leveraging all the tools that are in place to build this network faster for the people of California. In addition to that, I've been lead through the third-party administrator named in SB 156, that's Golden State Net. I have been personally pursuing corporate relationships to try to expedite the development of network. But as a baseline throughout the network across the state, we have a plan for 288 fibers and a dedicated cable to the state. So that's in the 10,000 miles. There's a few small exceptions to that, but overall, the entire network has a pretty comprehensive capacity for fiber in the middle mile. And that again, that's a mix of construction and dark fiber IRUs and joint builds. We developed that map that I showed you earlier through recommendations by the CPUC in their analysis of gaps in broadband where underserved and at-need communities exist. I think here it talks a little bit more about the CPUC and the vendors and some of the optimization process that we're going through. Let me jump back to the map because there's some things I want to share on that. One of the most important things that we've convinced CDT that they need to do is something called a ring topology. As many of you know, service reliability is really an important element to broadband. So while it may not look like perfect rings, like a wedding ring, we plan to create a backbone of infrastructure that follows loops, and some of them are quite large because of the geography, and some of them are a little bit smaller, but we want to have rings, a ring topology, and a backbone infrastructure that feeds the entire state. And what that ring topology will do is it allows for the network to pick the fastest and most, the easiest path back to a telecom center. If one side gets cut, it'll be able to go on the reverse side to get back to where it needs to go. So in order to accomplish that, Golden State has been working with the state of California to develop product offerings for the state. And these are products that are available to all entities, commercial, non-for-profit, communities, any type of entity that wants to avail themselves of the network. SB 156 very clearly calls out that this is an infrastructure available to all. And so there will be dark fiber available. But let's face it, dark fiber is useful to most communities in their local area. So in addition to that, we will be running DWDM network, which will be comprised of 100 gig, 10 gig, 1 gig transport layer 2 connectivity back to any area that any entity wants to get back to. In addition to that, we'll have capabilities up to 400 gig wave capabilities, which isn't a traditional offering by most carriers, but through partnership with Scenic and their technological advancements, we're able to put 400 gig into the network. So those types of speeds will be available. In addition to that, we'll be able to offer layer 3 connectivity, that is internet. And so the options will be to either purchase commercial internet connectivity through a main carrier, or you can leverage the state infrastructure. It really would be the same. We think it's going to be faster, cheaper, better, but you will have the option. You won't be limited to any particular provider. You can avail yourself of whatever you need. And then we'll have some virtual private networks, VPLs, VPNs available. In addition, I talked a little bit about, the backbone connectivity. This is what that sort of schematic would look like. There'll be a core backbone of services that will reach out to communities and provide the lit services for redundancy and resiliency within the community. I know it's particularly important in the counties on the coast, having options that go north, south, and east to create the connectivity, because if I've read in some areas that major cuts in the commercial networks have been really cause for concern. Let me see if there was anything else I wanted to share. I think that covers the most of it. But if you go to the MMAC website, you can look at the map and you can zoom in on any particular area. So here we are in Ventura. I want to point out a couple of things. I don't have any collateral on this, but I want to shout out to Brian, who I think is still on the call. I see his image there. We've had some conversations about Moore Park. There he is. Hey, Brian. So we're going to, we need to lock down the details of the collaboration. But the point is that about every 50 miles on this network, in order to create the connectivity and the light paths that send signals on this network, we need to have what's called an amplification hut. And we'll be working with Moore Park in particular because we just so happen to need a hut there. And we're working with them to co-locate that facility. But what's important about this comment is that the network the state is putting in place does not require you to get to a brick and mortar location. And if there's any one thing you hear from me today, I want you to zero in on this. We have the capabilities and plans to put in connection points anywhere along the network that will allow your communities to do a direct connection and reduce last mile construction costs. You heard some pretty important information from Megan about federal funding sources, BEAD, and et cetera. Any of those funding sources will have dollars available to you, and you need to maximize those dollars for the benefit of those last mile connections. Well, one of the offerings that we have at the state is that we will be doing those last mile connections at the closest point on the network to your last mile. So we'll introduce additional vaults. We'll do ring cuts. We need to understand the technical capability because we can't do that in the middle of an intersection, or there's certain limitations according to the geography, but we'll get as close as we can to reduce your overall last mile costs. In other words, we don't want you to build 50 miles to a brick and mortar location. We want you to come just to the network as close as you can, and we'll introduce a connection at that point. And that will allow you the diversity to go in two directions to the lit infrastructure and platform that those huts provide. In other words, we'll carry you to the hut. We'll get you there and get you on interconnected to the network in the most efficient manner that we can find. So if you take one thing from this conversation today, I'd like you to have that in your planning. We want to, always be collaborative, but you can count on connecting to the network in that fashion. I'm not sure that there's a whole lot that I can share at this point. We are working with Ventura County in particular on the potential of additional collaboration along 126 here. The county has engaged with, I think, some planning resources and has sought some funding around doing construction on the railroad right away here. CDT and I personally have been involved with analysis of that, and we want to make your dollars stretch further in the county. So we do want to make this happen. As I understand, that approval and funding is potentially going to be done in August at some point. CDT they've got a couple of different solutions to ensure that the county's dollars stretch further, but we do want to work with the county on this. So more to come on that. I don't know if anyone has questions. I'd love to entertain them. There's not a whole heck a lot to this presentation. Fiber is not very sexy. It's just a piece of glass, right? There's nothing complicated about it. It's what you do with it that's important. And all the folks here on this call, you're the ones that are making this usable and functional with your last mile connectivities and plans. So.
Thanks, Eric. We do have a question in the chat, but I also wanted to just share that the folks on this call are also in Santa Barbara County and San Luis Obispo County. So if we could, before we hit the next questions, let's talk a little bit about any updates in Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo that we need to know about. I know there was some consternation about the 166 route as well in Santa Barbara.
Oh, the 166. No, no, well, okay, there is consternation about that. Let me talk about that one specific thing for a moment,
Mhm.
because I think there was some miscommunication, and I know exactly where that came from. And so let me share that. This particular route has always been a part of the network plan. It was one of the original routes over a year ago that we had suggested to be constructed to CDT. It has not been erased from the network. Okay, that's the first thing that you need to hear for the folks in Santa Barbara. What transpired was I personally had been working with a commercial carrier that was also interested in this route. And so it was a joint build initiative. That particular carrier, Frontier, has actually in the last 6 weeks gone through some, let's say, monetary issues. They are still interested in this route. However, their construction plans have changed, and their construction model really won't work for Caltrans. CDT still plans to construct this route directly. We are partnering with Frontier to see maybe that they can be an anchor tenant or the first customer on the route, but this route is still on the map. The reason why somebody showed up at a meeting without it was because that their focus was construction, not joint build partnerships. And that's where the miscommunication happened. There were assumptions made. I want to emphasize again, New Kuyama, which is about right here, I think, all the way to Santa Maria, which is over here. This is on the map and plans to be built. So hopefully, I mean, you're hearing it from me. I've seen some other maps. This is still on there. So please be assured that sometimes Caltrans has a mission to build. And when we outsource partnerships through a joint build initiative, it gets removed from their list because they're not in the lead on that construction. And that's where that miscommunication came from. So I apologize to folks, but in short, we're trying to make those dollars stretch and ensure that we get the entire thing built. So that's one thing. I know that was a cause of concern, particularly months ago. San Luis Obispo, were there particular questions about San Luis Obispo? I'm not aware of any concerns or issues there.
I don't know. Is Laura still on the call, or Josh? Do you have any specific
I will tell you, San Luis Obispo is important in the network. You can clearly see that this is a very large ring here, which is integral to the network. And so we want to ensure that this is all completed for redundancy and resiliency of all these communities that are interconnected here.
Great.
And you can, again, this map is from the MMAC California website. You can get in, poke around. You can look at it. It zooms pretty good. It's ArcGIS online. You can play around with it and see what you like and don't like. And then I encourage you to please, if you have time, do a replay of the meeting tomorrow. If you're not able to attend, there's some important updates there, I think. The state is seeking additional funding to ensure that, all of this infrastructure and more is built, and quite a bit of funding is going into the CPUC CASA process. You may be aware the CASA program has been in existence, I think it's close to 18 years now, and they spend millions of dollars every year to ensure that communities are connected. And we are working closely with the CPUC so that we understand where their priorities are going forward in their CASF award program, so that we can ensure that those programs are resiliently connected to the middle mile network. So.
There's a couple of questions here. How final is this map? That's one question that's up here a couple times.
Yeah, that is a very good question.
Mhm.
Let me think about how best to answer this. I don't think this map is the final. I think that there's going to be adjustment to delivery timeframes. But 10,000 miles is the goal. I will say there's been some mitigating factors. Let me describe those. First of all, COVID, as everyone has lived through, has had a significant impact on supply chain issues, increasing costs for materials, sourcing materials. So that's been one issue. And I know we're generally out of COVID. I just had COVID literally 3 weeks ago. So my first time getting COVID, maybe it was a bad flu, whatever. It was like that. But, we went through that period, and that had an impact on all of construction efforts across the country. The second thing is that inflationary pressures in general had accelerated. And last year and this year in particular, they've had an impact on not just sourcing material, but manpower or human power. Sorry, no offense to the very smart ladies on this phone call, to the human power associated with constructing networks. And then the third thing is the release of funding, federal funding has hit every corner of the United States. So there's been a real demand for the expertise, the construction expertise, the engineering expertise, the boots on the ground. So it's really been a trifecta in cost pressure on building this network. And so there has to be some sort of adjustment. I've been working really hard personally with CDT to ensure that we can stretch every dollar that they have to accomplish this. We have a requirement to spend all of the federal funding by the end of next year. I think we can accomplish that part easily. Getting to 10,000 miles is going to be a tougher effort. And we're going to get very close to that. So I think they're going to, there is a plan to complete 10,000 miles, but I think there may be a couple of phases that this gets done. As I pointed out, I can't speak to the final design yet because I seriously, I haven't received it. They've been evaluating it as recently as last week. And so I haven't seen the final piece. There may be some pieces of this that do get deferred, but by and large, the state is committed to ring topology and resiliency through, again, all the corners of the state. So, to better answer that question, I would suggest that you attend tomorrow's meeting at the MMAC, and you'll get the best and latest update. I will be there listening as well, because I want to get the best update.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to elevate one more set of questions from Vicky. I think they're great. Is there any place we can locate all three of the types of GSN work, the builds, the leases, and the joint builds? Is that going to ever be a layer on the map maybe so that we can really not duplicate planning and really get the full picture of what's happening, or is that proprietary information?
I don't believe that it will be broken out in layers that way. And I honestly am not sure why it's needed.
Okay.
I'd love to understand the perspective about why that information is important. Nevertheless, I want to emphasize 288 count cable. The only one that I know of that's not 288 count is here, really far from you guys. That one has 74 count fiber. There's reasons for that. I don't want to get into that here. It's not in your community. It's straightforward. That community wants it. It's an extremely expensive build. That is one example. High count fiber. The other thing I want to emphasize is, lease or not, we are committed to providing interconnection capabilities anywhere on the route, even on leased networks. And in fact, that was a top concern for the discussion on 126, is does it meet the requirement of SB 156 and flexibility of connection and capability of servicing? Because for us, it's a little difficult to work on railroad right away if we cannot get off of it. The goal is not to get from one end to the other. The goal is to have infrastructure that is available along every stretch of the path. So Buckhorn, if one day Buckhorn has somebody building a WISP right there, anything imaginable tomorrow that we can't foresee, we want to be able to interconnect at Buckhorn. Now, I just make that up. I don't know what's going on in Buckhorn. There may be big things going there. I don't know. I hope so. But we want to bring broadband to all corners of California. So, CASF grants forthcoming in any of these areas are important to us in enabling those.
Great. And it looks like maybe Vicky was raising her hand to clarify. Do you want to unmute, Vicky?
Sure. I think someone else asked the question Josh asked, the follow-on question I was thinking of too. So I guess I got the impression that this map was only for the Caltrans builds from something you said, but if this includes the leases and the joint builds and everything, then this map is the comprehensive place where we would look for everything, all types of GSN work then?
That is correct. Yes,
Okay.
This is comprehensive of all things. Let me put this in the chat, this link, because it's
Thank you.
got a lot of
Thank
numbers
you.
and stuff in
That
it.
clarified.
Yeah, the MMAC website has a link, again, a link to this map, but this is encompassing of all network. Now, to that point, Vicky, as we solidify corporate partnerships, there's a potential that some of these routes could move a little bit, right? I'm thinking through the counties that are here. I'm not aware that there's really a big impact to any of that, quite frankly. Yeah, actually, I'm fairly certain that any corporate partnerships wouldn't change that. But this is based on the original design and Caltrans right away. There is a potential that some of this stuff actually here in this area could shift, but overall, there's only one way in and out of Red Bluff to Susanville, and that's along 36. So we've got whether we do a corporate partnership there or not, it's going to follow 36. Anyway, those kinds of things could change, but it's not significant, I don't think.
Thank you.
And to that point, the final map, I'd love to hear an answer to that tomorrow, because we ask that every day, quite frankly.
Great. Well, thank you so much. If there's more questions, we will go tomorrow, right? I'll check out the meeting tomorrow to get any questions answered there, because they may be presenting information, and then we'll forward on anything bigger or elevate it to your attention.
Yeah, and of course, I've talked with folks in Ventura. I've talked with folks over the last year, so I'm always happy to join in a conversation on a call that can clarify or answer any questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out to Golden State or to CDT. We can get folks on the phone and have a conversation whenever you need.
Great. So, thank you so much for your time today, Eric. And I'll throw up the link to the meeting. The link that's up is the link to the map, but if we can throw up the middle mile, I think maybe it was in here, but we'll throw up the link to the Middle Mile Advisory Committee
You
meeting.
want me to send that? I'll grab that quickly.
Oh, cool. Yeah, if you just throw it up in the chat. I'm
Will
actually
do.
going to pass the mic over to Julio Tamayo from AGIF for an update on the Affordable Connectivity Program enrollments in our area. Oops. Maybe I have to run through all of these old slides first. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Julio, you're up. Would you like to introduce yourself and a
Yes.
little bit about AGIF?
First of all, thank you, Shelby, for the invite, to this meeting. What a pleasure. And, in the audience, I also like to acknowledge, our director, Helen Galvan, and our coordinator, Rigo Hernandez. We are the American GI Forum Educational Foundation. We've been established in Santa Maria, California since the mid, 90s, and we've worked a number of projects, but today we're going to talk about a specific project where we've put most of our focus in terms of the ACP enrollments. And so I'm just going to read what's important about this slide is that out of 13 million households in California, we have a goal, approximately 844 are eligible for the ACP program. I'll explain what the ACP program, if somebody's doesn't know about the ACP program, but as a statewide enrollment, we're at 39%, which is about a little over $2 million. And so I'm going to talk a bit about, our contribution and our partnerships and how the American GI Forum is contributing to those statistics. So, the Affordable Connectivity Program, as you may know, it's a $30 financial benefit that each consumer receives upon qualifying. And a lot of the qualifying guidelines have to do with whether you're a member of the EBT program, if you're receiving any type of financial social assistance, whether it could be based off of your income. It could be based off of whether you're a participating college or university student receiving federal grants. So, and there's a tremendous focus on qualifying tribal lands, which qualifying tribal lands will receive a $75 financial benefit upon qualification of the ACP program. And so how does the American GI Forum participate in the ACP program? We work and operate under the umbrella of the with CETF, which is the California Emerging Technology Fund. We process and approve the consumer to the ACP program. We have a team of workers together with our director and our coordinator that approximately about 22 people work under and statewide IVR. So I'm going to give a more specific statistic about that. 48% of our approvals are part of an IVR system, statewide IVR system, collaborating with, California Emerging Technology Fund, CETF. The other 52% of what we do as an organization, we're, like I mentioned, based off of Santa Maria, California. We focus our efforts a lot on the tri-counties, working with Ventura County and San Luis Obispo County, but a lot of our outreach expands to Riverside and a lot of the areas, as mentioned prior, that the rural communities, a lot of the residential and rural communities throughout the state of California. So through the IVR system, our efforts are focused more on the outreach of, the state, from the border of the north part of California to the south Mexico border. So, but the other 52% I like to mention that are collaborating efforts have to do with school districts, colleges, a lot have to do with our community colleges within the tri-counties. We calendar and create our own events within the counties. We do a lot of tabling at swap meets. We do local stores. We do radio. A lot of our efforts do focus on digital marketing. And so we have had a tremendous success where, do listen to this number. It's highlighted throughout the state. We complete approximately 148 ACP approvals per day. So we are working very hard and very dedicated to making this program really enroll to the benefit of the consumer. So if anybody would like to reach out to us, and if we could be of any help, as an organization, we are based out of Santa Maria, California. We have a pretty big building where a lot of our efforts are taken care of. And so I probably just that's something that another good statistic that I like to share is, like, we're the #1 community-based organization out of 12 other participating community-based organizations without the state of California. So yes, our focus is, and our contribution is part of that, statewide enrollment that you guys can see on the screen. So shall we with that, we can open it up to some questions that me or the rest of the team can answer, or anybody has any statement or input that they like to tell us.
Thank you. And I want to clarify, because I put this chart up of our local numbers, that the percentage enrolled is the percentage of eligible households.
Eligible houses.
Right.
Right.
There was a question in the chat about that. And so we really want that right-hand column to get to be 100%. It has increased each of those 4 to 5% over the last few months, thanks in a large part to the efforts of AGIF and some other partners around the Tri-County area that are starting to embed ACP enrollment and education into their client engagement processes.
Absolutely.
I have to thank AGIF for their partnership. They have done a great job of being ready to roll out to libraries, schools, nonprofit organizations to help with ACP. So any of you who would like to ask questions, they're definitely a great knowledge base for this. Anyone else? Oh, Julio, can you provide your contact info? We will put contact info in the chat.
I'll put out my my email address.
Thank you. And I know there's some folks on this call that have done ACP enrollments. I know Cox Communications is here, and they've got a great education program. There's some opportunity for maybe collaboration there in their service area. I know Ventura County Libraries has dipped their toe in. At I think Thousand Oaks did an event a little while ago, but this is really a great opportunity.
Yes, and we have actually, Shelby, just as well mentioning that we've actually participated, with some of the statewide events that have been put together with Ventura County, Carpinteria, and I've been to the Family Resource Center in Cuyama, where we were able to not only provide assistance with the ACP program, but also be able to connect a lot of families with frontier cost-effective or zero cost, internet, in Taft. And also, I like to say that I really like when I get a phone call from anywhere in Cuyama or Taft, that but I've seen a couple of names here, just reach out to me and I'd be more than happy to connect the families with the ACP and the internet at probably zero cost, or very, very low cost with the provider.
Right. Well, if there aren't any other questions about ACP or any questions for AGIF, the office, for Julio, then we do have 5 more minutes. We can open it up for questions. If anyone has questions or comments or updates that they'd like to share. We had a jam-packed meeting of guest speakers, so we sort of decided to step back. Any other updates? Oh, great. It looks like Charter Spectrum has some light reading. ACP providing through Charter, wonderful. Yes. So I love seeing our ISPs step up and say, we're here in the community and we're happy to help with this enrollment too. That's a really valuable partnership for the community.
I mean, I'll just make the comment that we did get the VCOG LATA grant, and so we're about 2 weeks in from, we're really at the back end of the LATA awards, local agency technical assistance funding. And so we are rallying. I don't know what we'll be able to, we're all in supporting what's happening in Ventura County with the middle mile and in that particular FFA approach. And we'll be also scrambling, trying to talk to all of the telecoms, pull the municipalities together and do anything we can do in this window of 90 days that's possible. But we're in for the long haul. And so there were 3 things that we were going to get done under that funding. One was going to be putting together once and for all a planning strategy to create a broadband joint powers authority and to then pursue FFA. And so those are the conversations that are kicking in. I didn't report on it yet, but I would be looking forward to reporting on it in our next meeting because we are taking a straight up learning curve right now and getting everything going and launching, if you will.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions about the VCOG LATA grant? Got a lot of partners from Ventura here. All right. Well, I'm going to thank everyone for joining us today. We will make sure that we get this reporting out, and we are continuing to update our communication list and process. So we hope to be in touch with you all soon. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Shelby.
Thank you.
Thank you.